Alright, JosefVStalin, and welcome to something I've wanted to share with you guys for a little bit, and I've kind of had a little bit of trouble sort of creating my arguments, creating my template for how I want to present this. But it all started when I was talking with a subscriber over Steam. He shall remain unnamed. And in case you guys didn't know, I'm the kind of guy, I like to stir the pot. I like to disagree with people just for the sake of disagreement. Regardless if that's how I truly feel, I just enjoy argument for argument's sake. But, so, he ended up bringing up the point of religion, and saying that God's commands, this divine theory that God has, is our ultimate way of interpreting our moral behavior. Our ultimate way of judging our morals and the morals of others. And that without God's commands, without this divine command theory, the entire fabric of society falls apart and we become a seething cauldron of sin and corruption. Now I was thinking, no, that's not the case at all. And I've devised several points. I've devised an argument here that by the end of it, I want to destroy the idea that morality and religion are like this, and separate them, and make sure that by the end of this, you will realize that in fact they are very far apart. Morality and religion are very independent from one another. And the first way I'm going to do that is I want to pose a question. And that question is, do God's commandments make that act right, or does God command that act because it is right? And let's examine both those strings of logic for a little bit. Let's examine the fact that God's commandments makes that act right. Therefore, in reality, God commands us to tell the truth. He demands us not to murder one another. He demands us to be all happy, loving people. Hold on just a sec. Okay, sorry about that. Camera was running out of batteries, I had to plug it in. But from where we left off, God demands us to be these happy, loving, caring people. That is what God commands through the divine command theory. And thinking that this simple commandment is what makes that act right, then that makes that commandment entirely arbitrary, meaning that God has no reason to command us to do that. He has no reason of why that is right. It's entirely arbitrary. Also, that means he could have just as easily demanded us to be murderers and cannibals. And before you all object and say, well, God would never demand us to be murderers and cannibals, why not? If he arbitrarily demands us to be happy, loving people, then why can't he just as easily arbitrarily demand us to be murderers and cannibals? Either way, regardless of what he commands, he's got the same amount of reason and the same amount of weight behind both of them. Also, there comes a bunch of other problems that poses. How does simply commanding something make it right? Say I slap you, and then God commands that slap to be right. How does that make that right? It doesn't make any sense. You can't make something morally right just by simply saying that it's right, just by simply commanding it. It defies all semblance and sense of logic. Also, this assumes that without God there would be no morals. That, say, let's take a crime, rape. That without God there would be no one to command it to be wrong. However, regardless of God's existence, rape is still a terrible crime because it's malicious. It hurts someone both physically and emotionally, and can leave untold damage both in the short and long term. And that happens whether or not, God God happens to exist. It's the same outcome regardless. But with that chain being wrapped up, let's open up the other avenue, is that God commands us to do these things because they are right. And if you think about it, the flaw there should be fairly evident in the fact that there's something independent of God demanding us what's right and wrong. And that flies in the face of the commonly held Christian belief that God is a large, omnipotent being that is all-knowing and all-seeing. Clearly he's not all-knowing, because something independent of him is deciding what's right and wrong. And that's just a little bit too much power that Christians are willing to take away from God. But there also comes another flaw in how we interpret God's commands exactly. Do we interpret them through the Bible? Well, the Bible was written by humans, and it is interpreted by humans, and therefore is subject to human error. And once you get into that vast wasteland of uncertainty, things become a little bit more unstable. I mean, you see, there's contradictions across all religious texts, and there's even contradictions in the Bible. So, which avenue's right, what's wrong? It's all subject to human interpretation, not divine interpretation, and that puts a large damper on how we interpret God's commands. Also, we could say we interpret them through prayer, but at that point I could say that I can do anything I want simply because God commanded it to me through prayer, and at that point you wouldn't be subject to the morals of this world, and there'd be no way of disproving you because of that. So that's obviously a very dangerous situation to be, because I can kill you and I say that God commanded me to do that, therefore that makes that right. So clearly there's a lot of uncertainty in how we even interpret these commands. So to wrap this up, when you try and link morality to religion, when you really think about it, when you really boil it down, it just becomes a giant shitstorm. And that's the best way to put it. When you try and intertwine these two concepts, it just becomes a giant quagmire. It just becomes a mess that you don't want to touch. There's so many flaws and so many gaping holes in this theory. And it's best just to completely abandon it altogether and accept the fact that religion and morality are entirely independent from one another. But I think that is a very good note to finish this off. Thank you guys for watching. This has been JosefVStalin signing off for now, and I'll see you guys later. And I hope that for once, maybe I've made you think.